maybe 6 months, I was pulling almost 800 by then.
Gee,
Just it just came natural. It's just
that's
an easy lift for me for some reason.
Did your other two come along? I mean, you're again. I didn't mention this, folks, but Gary was an awesome, um, bench presser and squatter also. But do you notice that your squats and bench, do they come along the same speed, or was your deadlift just your baby? You really
Well, yeah, the deadlift was just more of a natural movement for me, and I won't say I didn't focus on the deadlift any more than the other two lifts. I wanted to be an all-rounded lifter, and it never really happened for me because leverage-wise, the bench press just beat me up.
right,
But when my squats were up, my deadlifts were up. Just because of the leg strength and
right,
the
right.
back strength that you need for the squat, the two work hand in hand. So if I was just training to deadlift out of meat, I still trained my squat and bench real heavy because you still need that upper body and that leg strength to be a good deadlifter.
Right. Training today is probably a bit different than it was 15 years ago with all the new technologies and gear and equipment. And I mean more so gear. I mean, yeah, supportive gear, but also the equipment, a lot of the West Side stuff, the Metal Militia stuff, all these different styles and whatnot. But maybe the deadlift hasn't probably changed as much. Tell us a little bit about your deadlift training, and let's start with this. Let's start with some of Gary Heisey's favorite assistance exercises that you think are the most relevant exercises to assist your deadlift.
Okay.
As far as just
Um, yeah, number one, my number one favorite deadlift assistance exercise was probably a good morning. I used to really, well, I say we used to, me and my training partners, we would go as heavy as we could on good mornings, and we would uh, we would bend over pretty far with them. We'd try to get to all but a 90 degree to the floor
what
with
kind of
our
bar
upper
would you use
body.
with that? This is the straight bar.
Um, well, sometimes we used a straight bar, and I also had a buffalo bar that I had received from Ken Leisner years ago. And I liked using the buffalo bar because it changed the position of the weights a little bit. It made it a little bit more comfortable on your back.
Hmm.
That was important. Another exercise I used to do all the time was haulings, which, if you don't know what they are, we had a 6-inch platform, and I would pull the weights off the floor, standing on the platform. The weights would be on the floor, I'd be on the platform, and I'd pull them up to my knee, the bottom of my knee, and then let it down. But what I did different than what a lot of people do is I would pull each rep. I would pull up to my knees and hold it for a second or two, and I would let the bar ease down to the floor. I would stand up without the bar and address it again, and I would do each rep as though it was a single, and I would do them as heavy as I possibly could up to reps of 3 and 5. And lockouts in the rack was my big thing for my grip. I would never use straps. I would always just use my bare hands. I'd use my over-under grip, but I did lockouts from like 2 to 3 inches above my knees, as heavy as I could go. Getting closer to the meat, I'd go up to singles. Sometimes I'd go up to 1,200 pounds just to prove to myself that I could hang on to the weight.
So, do you feel with those partials? Because we speak a lot of those today because a lot of the way the guys train today with squat and deadlift, and I was talking to Andy Bolton about some of his deadlift training. He believes a lot like in overload type stuff. Do you believe in overload to the point where, like for example, now you just sort of answered the question for me, but 1,200 pounds, which was a couple hundred pounds more than your max deadlift. Do you feel that there needs to be like an overabundance on overloads, or like for example, like just handling your max for more repetitions, or do you feel like you need to really, really handle a bunch of extra weight on top of what your max is?
Well, like the overloads on the deadlift, I used to do them because it's easier to lock the deadlift out at the top end. So I could handle more weight. I'll call it an overload because it was more of a strain on my grip than anything else, and my lower back and hips. But it also is a psychological thing. It made 900 pounds feel lighter, just like doing a walkout and a squat. We used to load the weights up. We'd go a couple hundred pounds over what we could probably squat, and walk out and set up with it, just to have that mental. So you didn't have your brain telling you that this is heavy.
Right.
When you were pulling what you could actually squat out of the rack.
Right.
Kind of a neuromuscular type.
Right, and even you're right, conditioning your central nervous system, sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And it helped. It definitely helped.
There's a lot of different opinions on grip. Now, here's my opinion. If you want to, learn from the best, or if you want to be the best, you want to learn from the best. So, I would have to say that talking to you and Andy Bolton and people who've held that all-time world record would be the authority on grip. And there's a lot of different ways people believe that, people say, well, the captains of crush work for grip, and there's also different ideas. What is the final word, Gary, on grip strength? What develops a 900-pound, 1,000-pound deadlift via grip?
Well, I never isolated my grip as I never did grip training, so to speak. The only thing I ever did to improve my grips, and I was a stickler on it, I never used lifting straps. I always relied on my grip, whether I was doing chin-ups, whether I was doing pull-downs, or stiff leg deadlifts, or bent over rows. I always relied on my grip. And I think that that's what helped my grip out, was just basically not relying on straps in the off season, and not relying on straps when I was doing heavy assistance work. That's what I did for my grip. I was afraid that if I would have isolated my grip training, that I could have possibly developed tendinitis, because it's such it's so easy to develop tendinitis in those areas when you do isolate your grip.
Right.
As far as using, back in the day, tennis balls or whatever other grip strength tool was out there. That's what I like to use. That was my main thing, was just relying on my grip for my everyday lifting.
Do you feel that you had, a natural grip compared to how some guys might have to develop it more? Or do you feel that, anyone, if they train that way, that their grip will come along with their deadlift? Or do you feel that you were just blessed with it, with a fantastic grip? Or
I think that what I did helped me as I progressed through the deadlift, but I do think that I did have a natural strong grip from doing foundry work back when I was a kid, and that kind of stuff. I just always had a stronger grip than the average Joe, but I do think that I needed to do what I did as I progressed in deadlift, because when I was pulling in the mid-eights in the beginning, grip was an issue. And as I developed and increased my deadlift, grip wasn't an issue in the 800s anymore, and it became an issue, in the higher weights. So, yeah, I believe I did progress due to, number one, the heavier deadlifts, and number two, the not relying on straps. Now, I'll probably have people argue with me till they're blue in the face about, your grip giving out before your back does when you're doing chin-ups and blah, blah, blah. But to me, my grip was my most important asset.
what were some of your most memorable meets? Just things that you remember, meets that meant something to you. I mean, I wanted to ask you about, I'm going to let you go ahead first, and then I want to throw my comments in about some meets that you did that I wanted to ask you about. Just pretty much fire away, just on the top of your head.
The most memorable one would have to be the Nationals out in Chicago. Ernie France ran Junior Nationals back in 1988, and that's when I did my 910. So I would have to say, when I broke the record,
Your first taste of the all time, right?
That was something special, just because it was something that I had tried a couple times before, and was just getting a monkey off my back, and I knew I was going to do it. I just didn't know when. And just Ernie just opened his arms out and just they just rolled the red carpet out for me after that happened, and it was just a great time. It was great being part of that. And then the Nationals in '90 was a great meet, and I think basically because I had the opportunity before the meet, I went down to work out with John Inzer for a little bit, and Jesse Jackson, big 148-pound squatter who squatted over 700 pounds at 148. He came up and trained with me to get ready for that meet. He and I both lifted in it, and it was just it was a great time because we both set world records in that meet. We both trained together for 4 months before the meet, and just the preparation up to the meet made that meet special for me. Because it was just we just had the best training and the best equipment for the time, and everything just fell into place. It was just meant to be.
And then the deadliest deadlifts, and then there was a contest, one of the deadliest deadlifts where you were painted up in silver.
Yeah, we did. I did the Iron Man thing and came
Right.
out the Black Sabbath Iron Man. Yeah.
Right. Now, was that like actually an exhibition thing, or did you actually do a pool, or?
No, we were pulling. It was a for real meet. I mean, he got some of the best lifters in the world.
Which he always did, right, at all those meets.
Oh
Right?
yeah, I mean, we had Goggins, Steve Goggins, and myself, and Jesse Jackson, and Ken Lane was there doing bench pressing, and I forget who else. We just had a whole house full of great lifters. And John Inzer lifted in it, and we had a show. We put a little show on, but it was all for real lifting, and we were all serious about what we were doing, and we had a blast. That was a fun meet. Signing autographs, and there was a lot of spectators. TV was there. He knew how to promote a meet. He knew how to run a meet.
I told him that I think that the sport could use a few more of those meets today, actually.
Yeah, well, it had crowd appeal. I mean, let's face it. If you're not lifting in a meet or coaching somebody in a meet, it can be kind of like watching paint dry unless you're a really, really hardcore fan. To go watch squatting, benching, and deadlifting and spend the whole day of it, which can be hours and hours and hours. John's meets focused on the highlight
right.
of the meet.
Well, they were the showcase of the best of the best of the best.
We put a show on to top it off, and with all the special effects and fire bombs, and it was just it gave the people wanted to see what was going to happen next.
Is there anybody who you would like to thank? Just do a shout out to. I know it's been a while since you've probably been or done an interview, so I mean, I'm sure there's some people you'd like to thank. And
well, the people that were the biggest influences on me and the biggest helps while I was competing was, number one, been John Inzer, because he was just a great inspiration if I ever needed anybody to talk to. And not to make this sound like this is an advertisement for Inzer Advanced Design. This is from the heart that John Inzer was a big inspiration for me, not only because of his lifting abilities, but his training abilities and his personal communication skills. If I ever needed any advice or just somebody to boost my morale a little bit, John was the guy that I'd call.
Right.
Another guy for that was Scott Warman. Scott Warman was a huge influence on me back in the day. A great all-around lifter, a great person. He also was someone that I called all the time for training advice, for inspiration, or whatever. And Jesse Jackson, who everybody knows was a close friend, Jesse, too, was, whenever I needed somebody to lean on, he was always a guy that I would give a call. So those three guys were probably the biggest three influences on me back in the 90s, guys that I would go to get training advice or personal advice, no matter what it was.
Gary, I would like to say that, you know what, it's been good catching up. Me and you have a history. We've known each other for 20 some years now also. And like I said, I mean, I will tell you that, coming up in the sport, you were a gigantic inspiration to me. Um, and just getting to know you, as a friend, and just you helping me out with my lifting. So, it's been a great ride, and it's great to, catch up with you and see that you sort of pursued the same, type of stuff that I've pursued. Which, I tell people to this day, we talk about lift-offs, guys who could hand off weights in the bench press. And I tell people that there was no one on the face of the earth that could hand off a weight like Gary Heisey could. I think the last time you handed off for me was down at the IPA Nationals down in D.C. And, you handed 770 off to me like it was like, you put it anywhere I want and whatever. It was just awesome. And so, it's been great, just the whole ride with you and your help. And I wish you the best, man, and anything I could ever do for you. And if you ever want to come back on the show and just, do whatever, man, it's been a pleasure, man. It's been great. I mean, I really mean that.
Yeah, no problem, Jamie. And anytime you ever want me back, anybody has any rebuttal or any questions for me, don't hesitate.
Definitely have to give us a call and let us know when you're going to start gigging, so we could, people can come out and check out your show. That's for sure.
Okay.
All right.
I'll let you know.
All right.
Maybe we'll do something together.
I'm thinking, you know what, folks? That was,
Elvis tunes.
well, that's what we were talking. It's sort of, we're keeping that secret, folks, but we are getting some stuff together, and when that happens, we'll let you know. So, folks, you are listening to Gary Heisey, and this is Jamie Harris of Big Evil's Lair, and we'll be back after these messages.